Greetings. I decided to coordinate tonight, although technically this is the logo they've got rid of, and this is the logo from the throwback jersey for the Winter Classic, so technically neither are the new jersey. But I gotta say, I love the way this one looks on me. This one makes me very happy. I wore the Vancouver one earlier tonight already, so I change multiple times a day. Because I can. Um, I've been asked about looking at seasons, and I was asked about the 06-07 season as an example. This is the 07-08 Hockey News Yearbook, which means it looks back at 06-07. So yeah, let's take a look here. It took 80 years of NHL hockey for the Stanley Cup to make its first West Coast trip. We're talking about the Ducks. The wait for the second won't be nearly as long. That's because the Anaheim Ducks are poised to be the first team to repeat as champions since the Red Wings in 97-98. If the Hockey News picks you to win the Stanley Cup before the season starts, you will not win the Stanley Cup. That is a rule. Sure, you could make a strong case against Ducks repeating. Start with the Stanley Cup hangover that seems to affect so many finalists, and did affect the Ducks in 08. Carolina won the Cup in 06 and failed to qualify for last season's playoffs, as did the other finalists from that year, the Edmonton Oilers. Also, the Ducks may lose all-world defenseman Scott Niedermayer and star winger Teemu Selanne. And regardless of what you think about the replacements, Matthew Schneider and Todd Bertuzzi are downgrades at best. And Selanne and Niedermayer both took their time with deciding that their careers would continue, and it hurt the Ducks because they were out of the lineup, and then they were in the lineup, and then they couldn't get any chemistry. And Bertuzzi was a disaster as an Anaheim Duck. He was injured and he was a disaster. So why will the Ducks win again? Start with goaltender Jean-Sebastien Giguère. There are better goaltenders in the NHL, no question about that. But in the postseason, Giguère, a Conn Smythe Trophy winner, has proven himself to be completely and utterly reliable. He also gives his team a chance to win. Schneider is no Niedermayer, but he's very, very good. And when you consider Chris Pronger remains the team's number one defenseman, Schneider is a strong number two, just as he was playing behind Nick Lidstrom in Detroit. But Pronger's no Nick Lidstrom. Selanne will be missed, but youngsters Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry, who happened to finish 1-2 in playoff scoring last spring, along with line mate Dustin Penner, will continue to develop into frontline players. Dustin Penner. Remember when he was a frontline player? Neither does he. The highlight of Dustin Penner, honestly, was during the lockout when he was on the Jimmy Kimmel show. That was probably the highlight of Dustin Penner's career. Bertuzzi and Andy McDonald stand to do their share of scoring too, and don't be surprised if rookie Bobby Ryan makes an impact. I liked Andy McDonald. McDonald was one of the players that I really liked on the Ducks, and it was hard for me to admit that back then, as much as it is now. But I liked Andy McDonald a lot. The Ducks' checking line of Sammy Paulson, Rob Niedermayer, and Travis Moen is the best in the NHL, and it didn't last. For whatever reason, those fourth line combinations, like Moen, Paulson, Niedermayer, which was the best, they don't last. I guess these guys end up getting more money than they should, or whatever happens, and Paulson kind of fell off a cliff after that year. He um, and Moen ended up being moved, I think, within a year after that. I know they didn't stay together. Though we aren't exactly sure why Brian Burke rolled the dice on Bertuzzi, we have confidence in the GM's ability to change on the fly. Bertuzzi brings truculence. Does nobody follow Brian Burke? It's all about truculence. If he spots a weakness, he will address it. Unless it's goaltending, in which case he'll just throw more mediocre goaltenders at the problem, hoping it goes away. He did it in Vancouver. He did it in Toronto. And if he was GM and not tree living in Calgary, you better believe they'd still have mediocre goaltending, because that's what Brian Burke's all about. Finally, there's no nonsense coach Randy Carlyle. As Pronger puts it, Randy won't allow our team to slide. He waited till he got to Toronto to allow a team to slide. Whom the Ducks will feast on in the final? Sorry, Senators, it's you again. I don't think the Senators got close to the Stanley Cup final again after that. That final made me angry. Really made me angry. Ducks goal, another cup. And yeah, departures, DePenta, Jackman, Penner. So they've got Penner as a departure, that's right. At the time that this was written, okay, about, them repeating, that was before the Oilers decided to offer sheet Penner. And not matching Penner's offer sheet was the smartest thing Brian Burke ever did. He was not worth the money. And I believe he would eventually be back. I think he went to San Jose after Edmonton because he wasn't worth the money and Edmonton had to part ways with him. No. L.A. Had to be L.A. He was on Jimmy Kimmel, Shen. It was L.A. Come on. Your brain's not that far gone. I have Breeze Glove in here. But yeah, Solani was off the team just for a while. And at the time this was printed, Niedermayer had already announced he was coming back. So, you make moves right, left, and center, and then players come back, players leave. It's just the Ducks had no chance of repeating. Their top 10 prospects, Bobby Ryan, Mark Matera, Logan McMillan, who was a flop because he was drafted by Brian Burke, Brendan Mickelson, J.P. Levasseur, Brett Skinner, who never really amounted to a lot, Eric Tangradi, Brian Salcido, Petteri Virtanen, and Ryan Carter, who's still a fringe NHLer. Oh, it's Atlanta. Next step needs taking, and they didn't take it. This was the last year for Kovalchuk. They had a front line of Kovalchuk, White, and Hossa. They weren't bad. That's the thing. The perception was that this was a really bad team, and they weren't bad. They just weren't very good. And after that run, let's see, where's departures and arrivals? Departures, Belanger, DeVries, Knighty, Mellenby, Sim, Kachuk. And without Kachuk, without Mellenby, DeVries is iffy. But they just didn't have it. They couldn't get back there. Prospects. How many of these are still in Winnipeg? Brian Little, Andre Pavlich, Boris Valavic, Nathan Ostrick, Riley Holzapfel. Holzapfel? Doesn't matter. He's not in the NHL anymore. Brett Sterling, Spencer Machasik, Tobias Enstrom, or Toby Enstrom, Chad Denny, and Jordan LaValle. Yeah. Oh, Boston. Bear trappings. Bruins must avoid inconsistent play, which has hurt the team's fortunes on the ice and at the gate. And they were predicted for last in the East in 08. They didn't finish last. They didn't finish first, but they didn't finish last. They had a relatively good season in 08. Oh, there's Phil Kessel in a Bruins jersey. Top 10 prospects. Tuukka Rask, Zach Hamill. Oh, for fuck's sake. He even looks soft in the picture. I have a picture of him there with a stick resting on the back of his neck. Surprised he doesn't have a bruise on the back of his neck from the stick sitting there. Matt Lashoff, Mark Stewart, Jonathan Siglet, Tommy Cross, Milan Lucic is 7th. Oh, what the hell? Big power forward with a scoring touch. See, and they've got Hamill as number 2 in the prospects because he was a top 10 draft pick. It's so weird how they rank their prospects. Number 8, some nobody named David Krejci. Number 9, Yuri Alexandrov, who I thought was going to be more of an NHL player than he turned out to be. And Ben Walter at 10th, who was Ryan Walter's kid. And I really hoped for that kid to make it in the NHL, and it just didn't work out. Buffalo, leader's gone, so what's next? Briere, Drury, and Zubris. Oh, yes. Yeah, we all remember that, don't we? I mean, if you're a fan of the Sabres, you'll remember that you had Danny Briere, Chris Drury, and Dinus Zubris all leave. And red indicates new arrival, and not anything really to replace them. So yeah, they were number 1 in the NHL, and it just fell apart for them from there. And then a couple years later, it had nothing to do with this ugly Buffalo Slug jersey either. But a couple years later, they would go out and sign a bunch of free agents. All of them flopped. And that's why you have Jack Eichel in Buffalo. Top 10 prospects: Drew Stafford, Andre Sekera, Dan Paille. Much respect for Dan Paille for his contribution to Boston winning the Stanley Cup in 2011. Clark MacArthur. There you go, Sens fans. You can hoot and holler over that one. Dennis Persson, TJ Brennan, Jonas Enroth, Marek Zagrapan, Michael Funk, and Marc-Andre Gregnani. Calgary. Deep flames hope to ignite. And boy, did they ever. They ignited their way towards the bottom of the league. Departures: Tony Amonte, Jeff Friesen, Roman Hammerlick, Darren McCarty, Jamie McLennan, Richie Regier, Brett Ritchie, Brad Stewart, Andre Zuzin. Wow, that's quite the list. But still, they had Owen Nolan as their number 2 right winger, so. Prospects. Oh, this is ugly. Leland Irving, Dustin Boyd, Michael Backlund, Andre Teratukin, Daniel Ryder, Eric Nystrom, Chris Chucko, John Negrin, Matt Pelich, and Brandon Prust. Heart and soul makes up for offensive struggles with Brandon Prust. Heart and soul. He throws his gloves at you if you don't believe in his heart and soul. Prick. Carolina Hurricane Revenge. No major rebuild in Carolina, where Team Hope's playoff miss was a mere blip on the radar. It wasn't. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. It was a window to the future. Top 10 prospects: Brandon Sutter, Justin Peters, Jamie McBain, Harrison Reed, Bobby Hughes, Drayson Bowman, Nicholas Blanchard, Danny Manzatto, Casey Borer, and Brett Carson. Their future watch grade was a D+. It's going to take a few more prospects to restock a depleted cupboard. Trading super prospect Jack Johnson last year was an ill-advised move with spite written all over it. Probably not super prospect Jack Johnson. Super? You sure? Super if you're the other team. Oh, super, they got Jack Johnson on the ice. This is great. We're going to score. Yeah. The thing I remember with the 07 season, though, and I'm going to go through and find stats on that season. As much fun as it is to go through all the teams, that's going to end up being a 40-minute video. Yeah. See, goaltending statistics. Backstrom and Fernandez were number 1 in the NHL in terms of goals against average. And there was a magic in Minnesota where any goaltender would suddenly become great, with Jacques Lemaire coaching the defense. I mean, look, Backstrom had a 1.97, 929 save percentage. Manny Fernandez, 255 with a 911 save percentage. But still, that's not bad. And then in Detroit, Dominic Hasek, 205 with a 913. Chris Osgood had a 238 with a 907. So at this point in time, there wasn't a lot to choose between Hasek and Osgood. Although in the playoffs, Hasek played every minute, and he was in 923 in the playoffs. Marty Brodeur played 78 games. Scott Clemmensen played 6. I can assume that Scott Clemmensen accidentally played 6 games, or maybe he won a game of rock, paper, scissors with him, because Brodeur was, that was brutal. 78 games in a season. I remember that. And then, surprise, surprise, he ran out of gas in the playoffs. Dallas had Mike Smith and Marty Turco. I remember being upset when Mike Smith was traded to Tampa because I believed he was going to be a star. And it still hasn't really happened exactly, so I haven't been too upset with that. Roberto Luongo and Danny Sabourin. Luongo, 267, or 229 goals against, 921 save percentage. Now, in Vancouver that year, the Canucks lose in overtime in Game 5 against Anaheim. And all I hear for days is how that goal was a bad goal. Luongo's goals against average in the playoffs that year was 1.77, and he had a 941 save percentage. I cannot stress enough how huge Luongo was in the series against Dallas, and then how huge he was again in the series against Anaheim. The only reason the games were close was Luongo. He got distracted because he thought there was a penalty that should have been called. So he was kind of trying to get the referee's attention while the play was still going on. And then Anaheim scored. Debatable whether or not it should have been a penalty because it was the Ducks. I'll say yes. But the fact is he took his eye off the puck and it went in the back of his net. But that was the first year for Luongo in Vancouver, and it showed me just how bad it was going to be for him in Vancouver because he played fantastic hockey all year. He allowed one goal that was iffy in overtime, and it was a game 5. It wasn't game 7. It's not like the Canucks were going to come back and win the series. But man, all I heard about for weeks was that Luongo, that goal, that was just shit. We could have gone all the way. We could have gone all the way. I heard that. I heard people say that. And I would just sort of nod and think, you're an idiot. The 06-07 Vancouver Canucks, they're tremendous scoring leaders. The Sedins, 84 and 81 points respectively. Next up was Marcus Naslund with 60 points. He was already on the downswing. When Naslund hit that downswing, he hit it hard. Like, I don't think he was ever right again after the Steve Moore hit. After Steve Moore hit him and put him out, I don't think Naslund was ever the same player after that. And his game just descended year after year after year from that hit. Brendan Morrison was next on the list with 51 points. Then Brian Smolinski, who had 7 points in 20 games with Vancouver after coming over, and then they didn't keep him, which upset me at the time because I thought Smolinski was good. Kevin Bieksa, 42 points from the blue line. Taylor Pyatt had 23 goals. He never matched that again. Sami Salo, 14 goals, 37 points, 67 games. If he had stayed healthy, if Salo's career had been one where he was healthy all the time, he would have been an all-star quite a few times. Matthias Olin, 31 points, 77 games. Another career ended by injury. Matt Cook, 30 points, 10 goals. Brent Sopel, 5 goals, 28 points. He had 5 points in 20 games after he got traded from LA. And it was that year when Brent Sopel came back to Vancouver that I remembered that Brent Sopel wasn't a very good defenseman. I would imagine there would have been a farmhand that could have done a better job than Sopel did that year. Willie Mitchell, 11 points in 62 games, doesn't matter. Alex Burrows, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points in 81 games. My friend Kimber and I, we had sort of a thing that we noticed that if Burrows scores a goal, the Canucks lose. And that year it was really true. Thankfully, he only had 3 goals. Josh Green, Rory Fitzpatrick, remember, vote for Rory. Tommy Santala. For some reason, Santala was considered for fourth line center duty by Dave Nonis. Mark Chouinard was another failed attempt at picking up a fourth line forward. Yannick Tremblay was a failed attempt. Now remember, this is a team that I was told was going to go all. This team could have gone all the way. I know who I skipped. I skipped Ryan Kessler, who had 16 points in 48 games. Krychek had 16 points, 78 games. Jeff Cowan, Cowan the Barbarian, 7 goals in 42 games. He had 2 hat tricks in there. So those goals kind of pump him up. But Trevor Linden had 12 goals, 25 points in 80 games, and he'd really lost a step at that point. But Jan Bulis, 12 goals, 11 assists, 23 points, 79 games. I shit-talked Bulis the entire year. Hated him. Absolutely detested Jan Bulis. Every time he was out there, I'm like, not Bulis, anybody but Bulis. People argued to me that the Canucks should have gone all the way. And then when I said, well, you can't go all the way with Jan Bulis in your top 6. And they kept saying Bulis was one of our best players. Yeah, he played 12 games in the playoffs. He had 1 goal and 1 assist. He was one of our best players. I think I found the root of the problem. The problem is Jan Bulis. Yeah, it's funny that I skipped that. I skipped that whole section. Isn't that interesting? See Bulis and Kessler, and I just skipped below them. because I can't wait to talk about Tommy Santala. And that was the team that I kept being told that Luongo was preventing them from making the Stanley Cup. Just for comparison, let's take a look at what the Maple Leafs had that year. Matt Sundin, 76 points. Thomas Kaberle, 58 points. That's when he was at his best. Brian McCabe, 57 points. Alexei Ponikarovsky, 45 points. Darcy Tucker, 43 points in 56 games. Jeff O'Neill, 42 points in 74 games. Kyle Wellwood, 42 points in 48 games. That's the stat that Don Cherry trucked out over and over and over and over and over again. That get mattered. Matt Stajan had 39 points in 82 games. Yannick Perreault, 21 goals in 66 games. Alex Steen, 35 points in 82 games. He was criminally underused by Toronto and has shown in St. Louis that he's the real deal. He's a solid top six. He's not spectacular, but he's solid, and I never understood why Toronto gave him up. Nick Antropov, I understood why he was given up. 33 points in 54 games. Bates Battaglia, 31 points in 82 games. John Pohl, 29 points in 74 games. Every time he touched the puck, I would say, smoke my pole. Smoke my pole has the puck, which is based on a line Paul Rudd delivers in 40-Year-Old Virgin. Ian White, 26 points as a rookie. Pavel Kabina, 21 points in 61 games. Remember, he was trumped as he was going to be great. Kabina was going to be the answer to the Leafs' woes on the blue line. But think about it. Now, with that lineup I just told you and those stats I just gave you, put Luongo in net for them instead of Raycroft and Aubin, and tell me who makes the playoffs. Have Raycroft in net for 72 games for the Canucks, and have Luongo in net for 60-some games for Toronto, and you tell me which one makes the playoffs. Because Toronto that year, they were ninth in the conference. They had 91 points. So yeah, the Leafs make it if they have Luongo instead of Raycroft. Raycroft's numbers were, let's see, they were .894 save percentage in 72 games. I think the funniest part that I found that year, as a non-Leafs fan wearing Leafs gear, was that Raycroft would play every game, and it was almost as if they hated their fan base. That's how it felt. It felt like they hated their fans. You know what? We're just going to keep throwing Raycroft in. When was the last time he had a good game? I don't know, but we're going to keep throwing him in. Where are you going, bud? Okay. But yeah, so Raycroft stunk up the joint. And 72 games. And that was when they brought in Toskala. And there's Justin Pogge. Justin Pogge, number 2 on their prospects list. World Junior star a few years away from NHL. I can't wait till he makes it. Yuri Tulusti, fast wingers impressed on offensive end. And boy, does he get offensive later. Nikolai Kulemin, Anton Strawman, Stefan Kronwall, Jeremy Williams, Robbie Earl, Phil Oreskovich, Brent Aubin, and Dmitry Vorobiev. And then their top draft pick, 74th overall, was Dale Mitchell. Can't say that's a flop because he was 74th overall, so the odds of getting a top player is pretty low. Yeah, it's fun looking back at years as they were. Like this was the start of the downfall of the Tampa Bay Lightning, where LeCavalier and St. Louis and the boys started dropping because they couldn't play defense or goal. And Stamkos comes out. The funniest part is, and this shows the law of averages, almost any team at the top will fall. And then it's how they draft and how they deal with it that decides how quickly and how well they come back up through the rankings. And one thing I will say for the Vancouver Canucks, and I guess I'd say this about Tampa as well, they don't stay down for long. They do every 5 years or so, usually fall apart, but they don't stay down for very long. And when I look at teams in the NHL, and I did this during the playoffs, but I didn't have as many viewers back then as I have now. So while we're looking back to 07 and we're thinking, and I keep getting shit on for for talking about who missed the playoffs last year, and like, it doesn't matter who missed the playoffs last year. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Why are you bringing that up? Because it matters. Here's why. Okay, so let's just go through the teams alphabetically. The Anaheim Ducks haven't missed the playoffs since 2012. The Arizona Coyotes haven't made the playoffs since 2012. So they've missed the playoffs 4 years in a row. The Boston Bruins have missed the playoffs 2 years in a row now. The Buffalo Sabres have missed the playoffs 5 years in a row. The Calgary Flames, at the time this book was published at the end of 14-15, they'd missed the playoffs 5 years in a row. It's now 6 out of 7 that they've missed the playoffs. The Carolina Hurricanes have missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 8. So it's 9 out of 10 right now. So that's why when I'm saying Carolina looks hopeless, that's part of it. They've missed the playoffs 9 of the last 10 years. And they haven't made any significant upgrades. Chicago has not missed the playoffs since 2008. Colorado has only made the playoffs once in the last 6 years. Columbus has only made the playoffs twice in their entire history, stretching back to 2000. Dallas looks like they're going to be in the playoffs for a while, but you never know because they had missed the playoffs 5 years in a row. They lost in the first round. Missed the playoffs the next year and then made it last year. Detroit's been in the playoffs forever. Edmonton, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 10 years in a row they've missed the playoffs. Florida, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. 12 out of 13. 13 out of 15 years they've missed the playoffs. Kings missed the playoffs this year. Minnesota's been in the playoffs the last few years. Montreal just missed the playoffs. Nashville's a playoff team now. The Devils have missed the playoffs 5 of the last 6 seasons. The Devils or the Islanders are a playoff team now. It's been a while since the Rangers missed the playoffs. The Senators have missed the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. Philly's been in and out of the playoffs for 4 years now. So now people are saying, oh, they'll miss this year because they miss every other year. Pittsburgh, it's been a while since they missed the playoffs, 2006. The St. Louis Blues have been in the playoffs 5 years running now. They went through a lean where they missed 5 of 6 years. But in general, St. Louis is good to make the playoffs. San Jose has only missed the playoffs once since 2003. Tampa had been a have-not team. I would consider them a have team now. Toronto. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 out of 11 years they've missed. Vancouver's missed the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. And Washington can consider themselves a playoff team. The Winnipeg Jets, as a franchise, going back to Atlanta, they've only made the playoffs twice in their entire history, going back to 1999. So this is why when I talk about how difficult it is for a non-playoff team to make the playoffs, and how certain organizations, they aren't built for the playoffs. I take a lot of flack for it, but in terms of movement in and out of the playoffs, it is usually the same teams in the playoffs every year. There will be those teams like Florida that come in and look good. But Florida could just as easily miss next year. And I know that'll sound like absolute shenanigans to everybody out there watching, but it can happen. So there's my look back at 2007 and a little brief history reminder of why or how certain teams just don't make the playoffs that often. And it is really hard to build. And that's why when people say just tear it apart and rebuild, and I've said that for Vancouver, it's not that easy. Because sometimes you can tear it apart. Tearing it apart is easy. Putting it together, ask Carolina, Ask Edmonton, even Florida before this past season. It is not easy to put it together. All right, that's it for me for tonight.